You gave me character, now give me commas.
Hey, well, good morning. I'm glad you guys are here today. A few weeks ago, we started a series asking this question, why am I not happy? It's a question a lot of us have asked. Maybe you've asked it even today, or maybe you haven't asked it, but you've just felt it on the inside. Why am I not happy? And we're doing this series, and this series is important because it's kind of a discovery or a walk through some of our emotional health, and what does God think about our emotional health, and are there some things that you are doing or that I'm doing, that we're doing, that erode our own happiness? And here's the thing, and here's a big idea that we introduced in week one. It's kind of a theme throughout all of this, and why this is important is because of this, and this is not in your notes, but you can write it in if you'd like to. You cannot be spiritually mature and remain emotionally immature. You cannot be spiritually mature and remain emotionally immature. And the truth is you're at church today, maybe you are a regular attender, maybe you're new, maybe you're just kicking the tires of faith, trying to figure out what you believe or what you think about when you think about God. Wherever you're at in your faith journey, there's a chance that you, like a lot of us, like you have a desire to grow, to kind of take next steps, to not stay where you've been, but kind of get to the next level. And so even in our faith, what we'd call like our spiritual maturity, like we want to grow, but sometimes it's our emotional maturity that's stunting our own growth. Sometimes it's our emotional maturity that's actually stunting our own happiness. Because there are some things, some emotions that you experience, that I experience, and that we can't really navigate through them in a way that is healthy. And because of that, we're undermining our own happiness. And so this series is a chance for us to walk through these things, because when we have some immature things we experience emotionally, it hurts relationships with others. It hurts ourselves. It hurts our ability to love others. It hurts our ability to love ourselves. And again, ultimately erodes our own happiness. And this is what King Solomon wrote in the Old Testament when he says this. He says, above all else, guard your heart. Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So it's not so much of living your life and just follow your heart. We have to guard our hearts. We guard what comes into our heart, because the way we live, the way we love, the way we do relationship with others flows out of it. And so the last couple of weeks, we've looked at a few different emotions that we experience that have a tendency to erode happiness from our lives. Like in week one, here's a kind of a recap and some fill in the blanks in your notes too. Week one, we talked about guilt, and how guilt means like you did it, right? You are guilty. You did something maybe wrong. You hurt somebody else. Guilt says this. Guilt says, I owe you. Because I did something and it hurt you, it offended you, and I actually owe you something. And then in week two, we talked about anger. Ernie talked about anger, and anger says this. Anger says, you owe me, because you have now done something to me, and I'm angry at you. You owe me. You should have done this. You shouldn't have done that, and now you owe me. And today we're going to continue in this, and the thing is with these first two, they really do feel like something has been stolen from you, something's been taken from you, or you've taken something from someone else. And the only way to make things right is for that thing that has been stolen or taken to be repaid. But the truth is, you know this, you've experienced this. There are so many things that when you are guilty by hurting someone else, or someone else is guilty because they've hurt you, that there are so many intangible things that could never really be repaid. And so we're stuck with this dilemma of like, how do we move past this emotionally? Because heck, this happened to me and it shouldn't have happened to me, and now I'm not happy. And so how do I get beyond that? And so we talked about how guilt, the remedy to guilt is actually confession. We confess to God and we confess to others. We go and attempt to make things right that we couldn't repay even if we wanted to. But we begin to reconcile relationship both with God and with others. And the solution to anger really is wrapped up in forgiveness, that God has forgiven me, and so I'm going to forgive others. And today we're going to look at another emotion, and it's a very, very subtle emotion. And to help us understand how subtle this emotion really is, what I want you to do is, let's just do this together. If you could actually reach into your pocket and pull out your wallet, guys, or pull out your purse, or maybe if you don't have one, pull out your phone and open your Venmo account, hold that in your hand and hand it to your neighbor, okay? You know, there is something emotionally charged inside of us when it comes to our pocketbook, when it comes to our finances, when it comes to, and the emotion we're going to talk about today is greed. So where guilt says, I owe you, anger says you owe me, greed says I owe me. Like heck, I earned this. I owe myself this. Greed is the assumption that whatever comes to me must be for me. Greed says I owe me. And if I don't take care of me, nobody else is going to take care of me. So I have to look out for myself and make sure that I am taken care of. Greed is incredibly subtle, because it's very, very easy to see greed in somebody else and very, very difficult to see greed in ourselves, which makes this message really irrelevant today, because I'm sure none of you are greedy, right? None of you, anyone want to say, I am greedy? No. So what am I even doing here? Why even talk about this, right? If none of us are, the truth is a lot of us where we can't see it in ourselves, we're already maybe thinking about who needs to be here to hear this message, right? And there's a chance that the person next to you is thinking, yeah, they're the ones that need to hear this message, right? The person you came with today. It's just difficult to see in ourselves. And the thing is this, is regardless of what you or I believe about God, regardless of even if you are a follower of Jesus, we all want to be viewed as generous people. None of us want to be viewed as greedy. We want to be viewed as generous. But when the topic of greed and when this emotion gets lodged into our hearts, it becomes our filter, a filter for which we kind of view all financial decisions through. On how does this benefit me and how does this make me happy? And it impacts our lives, it impacts our relationships, it impacts our happiness. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament, he wrote about 2/3 of the New Testament, a phenomenal leader in the early church. And he gives us some insight, some wisdom on how to navigate this subtle emotion that can erode our happiness. And in fact, one point he's writing to a young pastor, his name is Timothy, he's writing to a young pastor and he's giving him some instructions on how to handle this subtle emotion. And this emotion that finds its way, kind of lodges in our hearts. And the way he first describes it, he kind of points out how destructive it can be. Let's look at what he says in 1 Timothy. This is Paul's letter to Timothy. He says this, he says, yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. Okay, a lot of us, we read that and we're going to forget about that I'd even said that, because we're going to he continues. He says, after all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. Here's where he really gets into it. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. What's that mean? It means that for some of us, for many of us, it is easy for us to get so focused on our stuff, so focused on what we can gain, that it's easy for us to wander from truth and focus on our possessions that erode away our happiness. It just happens. It is incredibly insightful. And Paul wrote this to the early church in the 1st century. And yet here we are living in the 21st century, and it's still so relevant for us today. We're still wrestling with these same things. And if we don't recognize how subtle the issue of greed is in our own hearts, it becomes an appetite that is never satisfied. And we end up hurting ourselves, and we even hurt others in the pursuit of what we believe will actually bring us satisfaction and security in the pursuit of stuff. Now, thankfully, Paul didn't just give them that and leave it there and let it sit, right? He actually gives them some helpful instructions regarding how we are to live our lives. And in the next verses, we're going to see how Paul guides Timothy through this, giving him some wisdom regarding how we ought to handle all that God has entrusted to us and how to overcome greed. And so again, if you haven't already taken out your notes, here's some blanks that you're going to fill in. Number one is this: to recognize all that you have been given. Paul's helping Timothy understand, you got to recognize all that you have been given. In the words of Warren Buffett, you and I have won the ovarian lottery. Okay, because you did not have any say-so of which family you were going to be born into, on which country you'd be born into, in which time and era you'd be born into. You didn't have really much say-so of the opportunities that would just be in front of you or the talents that you would even possess. And so whatever material wealth or riches that you've been able to accumulate in this world really has been entrusted to you by God. And so the question that we've got to wrestle with then is, why did God give me this? And how am I to steward it? And so again, here's what Paul writes to Timothy. Here's the instructions that he gives him. He says, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud. I think it's fascinating. Teach them. It doesn't, just to be very clear and very upfront, Paul is not saying, if you are rich, you are a problem. You are bad, you are doing it wrong. That's not the issue here. But there is some problems that come along with being rich that average folks don't have. And so Paul's giving Timothy that teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Paul says, hey, Timothy, whenever you come across rich people, here's what you are to teach them. Because Paul realizes there are very specific instructions that rich people need to have, because rich people have unique layers of complexity and stress that normal people just don't have to deal with. And oftentimes we are tempted to skip these verses because when we look at them, we look at our life and we're like, all right, well, I'm not rich, so I don't really got to focus on this. I can skip this part. I'm not rich. But let's take at some of the unique issues that rich people have to face, right? Paul says teach them because they face some, like it's just hard being rich. I got to imagine. Rich people, they save up money because they don't need all the money that they make. So they actually have enough to save up. And maybe they will have to make decisions how they're going to use that money one day. Like, oh, my kids are going to go to college and I have to decide, do I go to that college, state college, community college, Ivy League college? Well, how much money did we save up? How much can we afford? It's hard being rich and making these decisions. And then they have to decide, oh, my kid can drive now. I'm going to buy that kid a car. Rich people will do this sometimes. They can buy their kid a car. And then they have to figure, oh, man, but now we have to give extra insurance. This is so stressful to be rich. And so they have to figure out these extra things. Rich people have to do like financial planning, estate planning, like do we do a will, do we do a trust? And they have to pay someone to figure out what they're gonna do when they die because they're gonna have enough money to have enough money left over. It's hard to be rich. Rich people have to, they look in their cupboards, they look in their fridge and like, some of this is getting old. Let's take out all the old food just so we can bring in the new food, right? And they just, like normal people don't have to do this usually, but rich people have to make decisions like this. It's hard being rich. I know my kids, it's hard. They never want to agree on what they want to eat. And I remember just recently I had to go to my fridge and I open it up. Like, all right, what can we do for dinner? Well, this one will make that kid happy. This one will make that kid happy. Then I had to go out to my garage fridge and I was like, okay, this one will make that kid happy. Phew, I'm glad I got a garage fridge. It's hard to be rich. And they have to think about so many different things. It's such a hassle, right? Rich people have kids that have too much stuff. And so rich people tell their friends, like, I just don't want my kids to be raised spoiled. And they go home and they get their kids more stuff. It's just part of being rich. Rich people go to their kitchen. They're like, these cabinets, yeah, they're holding everything they need to hold. These appliances, they cook the food, they hold, but I would sure like it all to be updated. And so they pull out everything from their kitchen and to put in, that works perfectly fine, just to put in other things that work perfectly fine. And then they have to complain, oh man, construction for weeks. We had to eat out for 3 weeks straight. It's hard being rich. And rich people go into their closet, and rich women can go in their closet, and I don't know this from experience, I've just heard about this, and they go in their closet and they look at all their clothes. I'm like, I got nothing to wear, okay, right? You know some rich people, okay? I can tell, okay? And while the rich husband is down in their garage where they park their cars. Some people don't have cars, let alone even their own home. And rich people can park their cars in their home, right? And then that car gets a little old, and so they take that car that works perfectly fine and they go trade it in for another car that works perfectly fine. It's hard to be rich. It's hard to navigate these things. Rich people have to, man, it's stress. They got to deal with a lot of different things that just the normal people don't have to deal with. And if you're like, yeah, but I'm not rich. I'll tell you what, if you own a pair of shoes that you go to church in, and a pair of shoes that you go to work in, a pair of shoes that you work out in, and a pair of shoes that you mow the lawn in, you're rich. Okay, if you have clothes that you wear for specific events, you're rich. If you have clothes that you pack up and put away for one season to pull out other clothes for another season, you're rich, okay? This is just reality, and rich people have to deal with some things that sometimes people that are without don't have to deal with, right? There's complexities, there's layers of stress that come along with finances and stuff and the accumulation of stuff. And rich people, they got to deal with this. And so the problem is, nobody thinks they're rich. But yet a lot of us have a whole lot of stuff. And we base our value, we don't think are rich because we don't think ourselves as rich because we often base our value of the pay grade above us. Gallup did a survey recently, and they asked people, who do you think is rich? And people that made $30,000 a year or less, they're like, probably people who make about $75,000 a year. That's rich. That's a lot, man. I can't even dream, And then you ask the people that make $75K a year, and they're like, well, people who make $100, $120, $150K a year, that's rich. And then you ask people who are making six figures a year, what's it take to be rich? And they go, well, people who have like a few $1 million worth of assets, that is rich, right? It's like a moving target, right? It's relative to what we currently make. What's fascinating is some people are like, as a pastor, some people are like, well, do you get paid to do what you do? Don't you only work on Sundays, you know? And they, like, some people are like, that's a full-time job. But, and people don't care how much their pastor makes until they find out their pastor makes a little bit more than them. That's true. Like, it's just reality. Like, it's a moving target on what rich is. But statistically, if you make $37,000 a year or more, you're in the top 4% of earners, wage earners in the world. And all it takes is to make $45,000 or more, and you're the top 1% of wage earners in the world. There's a very good chance that just because of the country we're born into and the family we're born into, the community we're born into, that we have more than the average household, the average family in the world. And when I say those numbers, nobody in the room was like, yes, we're rich. We made it. Let's go home and party, right? There's not like oh man, now I'm content because he just told me there's no sense of relief, right, when you hear that. So Paul says, don't be proud. Don't be proud about what you have. Why? Because everything that you have has really been given to you. And you can say, yes, I worked hard for this, and you did. And I'm not minimizing that, I'm not taking that away, but you didn't work hard to hit the genetic lottery just to be born into the family you were born into and have the opportunities that were placed in front of you. Everything you have, Paul's helping us understand, everything you have is a gift from God. Everything that we have has been given to us. So we have to recognize what has been given, and then we have to recognize these verses apply to us. What Paul is communicating here. So Paul gives us the next step. He helps us take it a step further. Here's what he tells us to do. He tells us to trust in God, not money. Trust in God, not money. Fear is the driving force behind greed. Fear fuels greed because greed is supported by this endless, like, what if? Like, what if it all runs out? What if it gets lost? What if it gets scratched? What if they have more than me? What if there's no more left? What if I lose my job? What if the economy crashes? What if? And it drives up fear and it drives up greed. So again, Paul says to Timothy, he says, teach those who are rich in the world not to be proud, not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable, that their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. So Paul says, don't trust your riches. Trust the one who richly provides. Don't trust our stuff. People with greed lodged in their hearts have this fear that God can't or won't take care of them. Specifically, he won't take care of them to the level that they've become accustomed to taking care of themselves at. And so they continue to take matters in their own hands. They shift their sense of security away from a trust in God to a trust in what they can acquire and maintain on their own. And that is what provides a sense of security for them. But in the Old Testament Proverbs, look at this. It says, the rich think of their wealth as a strong defense. They imagine it to be a high wall of safety. Even look at what Jesus said about this. Jesus says this in Matthew. He says, no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And you say, hold on, wait a second, Jesus. When did you say you can't serve both God and the devil? Like, wouldn't those be in opposition? Wouldn't those be the opposites? But Jesus knows something that a lot of us may have never said in our own words, but we've maybe experienced or we're understanding today. Jesus says that you cannot serve both God and money because he knows the number one thing that will distract your trust and your dependence on God is our trust and dependence on our stuff. Jesus knows this. And so Paul says, recognize what you've been given and don't be proud. Don't allow your hope and trust to shift from God to your stuff. And then he gives us an action step here. He gives us an action step where he says, regularly practice generosity. Regularly practice generosity. The way to clear our hearts of greed is to regularly practice generosity. Not like every once in a while. Not when it feels right or it feels good. It's a matter of practice. It's like a default setting, right? If some of you go to the doctor and you find out some things about your heart, and the doctor says, hey, you need to regularly exercise, right? Because your heart needs it, your body needs it, your health depends on it. And not one of us would hear that from a doctor, go home and go for a run. I'm good. I did what the doctor ordered. I finished. I am now healthy. You need long-term health to sustain that, right? Generosity is not done in a moment. It's a practice that it's really a lifestyle. It's a privilege to be able to give. So we practice it regularly. It's a regular practice of generosity. This practice declares our dependence on God. It says, God, my security isn't found in my wealth. It's not found in my possessions. My trust is not in my riches, but it's in the one who richly provides. And so here again, here's some instruction that Paul tells Timothy here. He says, these are the things you need to teach to these rich people, those that have extra. He says this, he says, tell them to use their money to do what? To do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. The only way to really practice generosity is to be active and intentional about it. Generosity is not something that happens spontaneously. It isn't something that we just kind of stumble into. And when you don't regularly practice generosity and use what you have to give away to others, you often can drift back into a position of pride and a position of greed, trusting in your stuff for the security and the confidence that it brings, that you feel like it brings you. The only way to keep greed from really lodging into your heart is to actively and regularly practice intentional generosity. And Paul says this, he says, hey, there's a byproduct when you do this. There's something that happens in your heart when you actually practice generosity. And here it is in your notes. He says it will help you develop an eternal perspective. It'll develop an eternal perspective. Listen to how Paul describes this byproduct that comes as a result of choosing to live our lives this way. He says, by doing this, these rich people that Timothy's supposed to teach, by doing this, they'll be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. In your notes, I want you to just circle that, true life. True life. What's that mean? It means that there is more to this life than just this life. That every time that you recognize that that you can recognize what you have been given, and you choose to trust God and not your stuff, and you regularly and consistently practice generosity, you are actually investing in an eternal treasure. It gives you an eternal perspective. You cannot take anything with you when you die, but you can send it ahead. You can invest in things that have eternal significance, and when you do, when you choose to recognize that what God has given you and you practice generosity, your security rests in God and you develop this eternal perspective. Guilt rarely motivates people to generosity. Awareness will sometimes motivate people to a momentarily generous moment. But you know what changes our hearts from greed to generosity? It takes our heart and our attention off our stuff. This thing that is never enough. The pile's really never big enough. You could always get more, and somebody else always has more. And if that's what we're chasing, you know what actually changes that? It's generosity. And it helps us develop this eternal perspective of where we're storing up our treasures. We experience true life. And so how do we do it? Just some practical ways to participate in this. What's it look like? I want to give you two just simple steps that you can do. And hear me on this. Just stick to these, because sometimes when the church talks about money, this is when people like check out. And just the fact that people check out when we talk about money should reveal to us how closely tied to our heart this actually is, and why it actually is a very big deal that we talk about these things. And I'm not here to try to tell you to give Imagine Church a dime today. If you're here and you're like, I don't want, like, that's on you. But if you're here, especially if you call this home, I'm challenging you as your pastor to consider what Paul teaches another pastor in the community, to how to teach people of those who have wealth and those who have extra and those who have an income that they have been given and how to manage it. And so here's some just simple steps that Paul gives. Give back to God first. Give back to God first. I intentionally wrote the word back there because when we give to God, we're actually returning to Him what He has already entrusted to us. So if you want to be consistently generous, you give back to God first. You make it a priority. Again, in the Old Testament, in the wisdom literature of Proverbs, it says, honor God with everything you own. Give Him the first and the best. What's that mean? It means when you get paid you get paid weekly, you get paid every 2 weeks, every month, whatever, that you simply just have a plan to give to God first before everyone else gets paid. This is an act of faith. This is an act of maturity. God, I trust that you are the owner of it all, and that you will provide, and so I'm going to return to you first. In Chronicles, 1 Chronicles in the Old Testament, it says, wealth and honor come from you alone, for you rule over everything. But who am I and who are my people that we could give anything to you? Because everything we have has come from you, and we give you only what you first gave us. The truth is it's not all the time, but because of repetition of this over a long time, I can look at my stuff and not really look at it as my stuff. I simply get to be a manager of what God has entrusted to me. Returning to God first is this consistent reminder that I am the manager. My position is manager, and he is the owner. And so we give back to God first. The second thing is give back to God a percentage. Give back to God a percentage. Throughout the scriptures, there's a pattern of God saying a percentage of what you have belongs to me. He never gives a dollar amount, just a percent. And the reason is then we give in proportion to what has been given to us. So Deuteronomy says, make an offering of 10%, a tithe. Tithe literally just means a tenth. Make an offering of 10%, a tithe. Bring this into the presence of God, and this way you will learn to live in deep reverence before God as long as you live. And all throughout the scriptures, we've come to understand that God doesn't need your money. God doesn't want your money. He doesn't need something from you. He wants something for you. I like that last line in that verse. He says, in this way, you'll learn to live in deep reverence before God as long as you live. There is something about following where our finances go that reveals where our heart is connected to when it comes to God. And so we understand that God doesn't need this or want this. God just wants our trust. He wants you, he wants me to trust him, to look at him for the source of our security. We don't put our trust in our riches. We put our trust in the one who richly provides. And my goal is to do this throughout my life faithfully. My goal is to, and there's been times in years where it was lean and I didn't want to because I had a plan for that money and giving wasn't in my plan. But for decades now, this has been part of a practice of my life. And I want to continue this, that every time I get paid, that it would be my habit. It's an exercise of saying, I don't own this. This is a blessing. And I'm going to give back to God out of what I have been given. Oh, and when you do this, what happens, again, it dislodges greed from your heart, and you start to view other people, and you start to view the world through the lens of generosity. It allows you to really see people the way that God sees them, because sometimes when we think about what's in it for me and how's this benefit me, it's like a wall and a barrier that we think is actually protecting our security, but it's actually being a barrier to see people the way that God sees them, because we're building our kingdom. And God has invited us to have an eternal perspective where we build and invest into his kingdom. And before we close today and before we wrap up, I want to just say a few things. I know that sometimes people even ask questions about when it comes to generosity. They wonder, like, hey, why should I give to the church? There's a lot of great charities out there, and there are. And I would encourage you to give to some great charities out there, things that you're passionate about. I'd encourage you to be part of that. The model in scripture that we see is that first 10% goes to the local church to continue the mission of what God is doing through his church. And so I'm just asking us to follow that. That it doesn't have to be the minimum, it could be the launching pad. It could be the starting point for some of us. Even in our church, I think this is so incredible. You guys are a generous church, and collectively, a few months ago, we ended a campaign that we did to raise $100,000 to help us launch Imagine Church. And because of your generosity, we raised just over $115,000 to help us relaunch. And because of that, we not only got to update kids' rooms, we painted walls, we painted ceilings, we did carpet, we put some new toys in, we did a new road sign, we had to reprint everything that we have, rebrand it all. We sent out a mailer to our community because we wanted to reintroduce ourselves to our community. And because of you and because of your generosity and the difference that is making, that just in the last 7 weeks, we've grown by 31% as a church. That our average attendance was 202 people. You can clap. We are at 202 people, and right now we're averaging 274, and we didn't count Easter. because Easter doesn't really count. It's an anomaly. It's like Christians that come just for Easter, which is awesome, and do it. Come, bring. And I'll tell you this, that you are not a number, you are a name. And every name matters to God, so it has to matter to us. We can celebrate numbers because they represent the names of individuals that God sees. And we had a chance to see them on Sundays. We had a chance to see them get in a group this season. We had a chance, and so you matter, and your generosity is making a difference. And second, this is not a message of, hey, we need your help. We're desperate. I decided a long time ago that I'm never going to speak on money when we are in a season of desperation. The reality is that there's overhead, there's bills, there's all the different things. And this is why when you give to the church, it helps propel the mission forward, because you help not just pay the bills, but do all the things that we get to do. Kids are getting introduced to Jesus today because of your generosity. Youth, last 2 weeks ago, they took 26 youth over to a conference. And many, I know because I have kids in youth, and they invited friends to show up. And I know some of our kids' friends had never stepped foot in our church or any church until they got invited. Your generosity is making a difference. So we're not here to say, hey, we need your money. We're desperate. But I'll tell you what, when everybody gives, when everybody participates, that all the needs of the kingdom are met. Not only do we pay all the bills, but we get to be extra generous with what we have. We already set aside a budget to say, how can we be a blessing to our community? How can we help people when they're in a need of help? And we have a portion of it that goes to that. And when everybody participates, we get to do that. We as a staff run lean. We pinch pennies. We aren't here for show. We're not here, we're doing what we can to be good stewards. We are managers of what God has given us. And when you give every penny that you give, the board and the staff get to manage that and say, God, use this to enhance your kingdom. We don't need something from you. We want something for you. That's the heart of God. And we give when you know the most famous verse in all of Scripture? The most famous verse. You don't even have to have church background. You've heard this verse because you see it on football players' eyes. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. My hope for you, my hope for every one of you, every friend that you're ever going to invite to walk through these doors with you, for those of you who are far from God today, my hope is that you will know what God has given to you so you can give your heart to him. You say, why am I not happy? Some of us, that's your launching pad right there. It's not about finances for you today. It's not about rich today. It's about, I need to give my heart to my Savior. I need to give my heart to the Lord. I need to give my heart to Jesus. And we do that because we look at the verse again. For God so loved the world that he gave. We give because he first gave to us. And he gave us his Son. And Jesus came into this world, and because of our wrongdoing and because of the way we fall short, he was put to death on a cross. But God, through his power, rose him from the dead. And then we're invited into new life through him. And so it begins with giving our heart to Jesus. And then as an expression of that faith, as a maturity of faith, we continue to give as generous people. But if you're here today and that is where you need to start, you have a choice to make right now to say, I want to give my heart to Jesus. And we're going to pray. And I'm going to ask all of us to consider what our next step is and what we're going to give. Let's pray together. God, thank you. Thank you that you gave to us by sending us your Son. Thank you that you even gave to Paul some instructions to give to Timothy on how we can navigate these complex issues. But some of us are here, and before we even deal with the finances, we need to deal with our heart. And we're in a spot where we say, God, I give you my heart. And I've given it to a lot of things, and I can see how those things have not helped me. But God, I give you my heart right now. Forgive me for my past. Forgive me for my wrongdoing. Forgive me for trying to take control for myself. And I give you my heart. And I choose to put my trust and faith in you as the Lord and leader of my life. Would you lead me? Would you guide me? And then God, as you lead and as you guide for all of us here, that we're in a spot where we say, God, if you're leading and you're guiding, are we following? Are we walking in obedience to what you are leading us to do? And so God, we now consider what we're going to give as an act of obedience of faith, that we would be people who live generous lives because you have given to us, so we give to you. And it's a challenge, and it's hard because our heart is connected to it. But God, right now we choose to put our trust and our security and our hope in you and not our stuff, which is so uncertain. God, give us an eternal perspective to see what really matters as we become generous people. In Jesus' name, amen.